Hey, it's great to see the front of your faces instead of the back of your faces this morning. I'm going to go back to when I first got interested in photography itself. Back when I was about 10 or 11 years old, my dad bought a 16 millimeter movie camera. And he really wouldn't let us kids touch it. But one day he needed to be in the picture. So he handed me the camera and showed me what I needed to do. And then just before he stepped away from me, he said, and remember, just because it's called a movie camera doesn't mean it should be moving. The subject should be moving. And that is something that I have remembered all through even my video work here. Sometimes I do move the camera faster than it should have been moved, especially if I start looking at the video itself. Back then, his movies came in a film cassette of some sort that slipped into his camera. And that was about 3 minutes of actual movie time. And back then, the movie did not have sound either. So we've come a long ways from there. And all of us kids enjoyed watching the movies that he was making for special occasions, Christmas, first day of school, things like that. Then when I got into high school, I ended up with, I usually would use my mother's box camera, which didn't take any education whatsoever except to know which way was the front. I got an Argus C3 35 millimeter camera when I was sophomore or junior in high school. And I ended up taking snapshots for the school annual. Back then the school annual was only every other year, and our particular class was the graduating class. And a fellow from the class below me was also taking snapshots. He had the capabilities and the know-how on how to develop these 35 millimeter films into pictures. And I would help him a few times on that. And from that 35 millimeter camera, you can take either pictures or slides. And I have a bunch of slides of family activities during my high school days. And right now, I've got a daughter that's working on ancestry, and she's thoroughly enjoying those pictures. Then I went into the Air Force. Well, after college, I went into the Air Force. And I really don't have very many pictures of my college or high school or Air Force time. And I don't know why that happened. I still had the camera, but I just wasn't using it. But I did have a Polaroid camera, and that's what many of Martha's and my wedding pictures are on, Polaroid film. Back when you could take the picture and then peeling off it and the picture would arrive. My very first movie camera, not a video camera, a movie camera, I purchased on my trip from home to the hospital to pick up Martha and our first child. And I just picked up a cheap 8 millimeter movie camera. And so I've got those stashed away somewhere. In all the moves I've had lately, I don't know where they're stashed. Then, let's see here. I was hoping that our kids would enjoy these videos as much as we kids did, but that hasn't taken place like it did, and well, they're getting used to the things now. I never got around to editing various events with movies, because back then, to do that, you actually cut the tape and then had to tape the next piece together. And I did put a couple of 50 or a couple of short cassettes together, so I had just one movie. But to trying to do the editing that's available to do today would be a real mess. I would have a bunch of clippings on the floor, quite frankly. My first video camera was a large VHS camera that sat on my shoulders and wasn't real convenient to carry around. And we still have some of the videos that I had done there. And that was my first camera that also had sound. So that was new to me also. I did end up at one point having 3 of these cameras, video cameras. They were high 8. And I started off with, started with one, of course, and then bought a second one because I was doing some videoing of stage things. And the action on the stage would be here and here, and it would help to have 2 cameras. So I bought a second camera to do that, and then I did a little bit of editing with that, which was interesting, but not interesting enough to continue doing, quite frankly. Then I dropped one of those cameras and it broke, and I'd sent it in for repairs, and I thought, you know, I can't live without 2 cameras right now. So I ordered another camera, which is a little newer model, or of that same model that I had, so that all 3 cameras of mine were pretty much the same. And I got it, opened the box one evening and took a look at it, got the camera out, and all the controls were in the same place. And I didn't do anything else with that camera that night. The next morning, Martha had gone downtown early in the morning, and when she came back, she woke me up. She said, "You got to get downtown with your video because the downtown is all filled in with water. Highway 19 is underwater. Some of the other bridges were not opening and so forth." And so I just grabbed this new camera, and I happened to have had fully charged batteries and some film to put in this, or some tape to put into this camera from my others, and it slipped in beautifully. And I did end up editing about an 8-minute video of what I had done with the flood things that I did. I did have the unique experience, too, of having to be walking by the Channel 5 TV van. And another fellow had a movie camera also, and he said, "Do you guys have videos of this?" And we both said yes, and both of our videos got downloaded into their computer. I don't know if any of it got used or not, but it was interesting to have that happen. When we decided to start spending 6 months in Arizona, we bought a house in Sun City Grand, and we were spending 4 to 6 months there every winter. The first week after we got moved in and somewhat settled, I started wondering, what am I going to do? I'm not a golfer. And that seemed to be the only thing that most of the people down there did. And the second month, we got our Homeowners Association monthly magazine, and somewhere in the middle of the magazine, there was a little tiny ad, "Interested in video? Call me," with a phone number. And I called that phone number, and the voice on the end introduced himself as Alan Reamer. And about the only question he asked me was, "Do you have a camera?" I said yes, and I didn't add that I had 2 others besides, but because I had only brought one with me down there. And he said, "You're on." And he said, "Some of us are getting together for a coffee meeting tomorrow. You're welcome to join." So I did, and I met some of the other fellows that worked for what was called Channel 22 down there. The first year that I videoed down there, all of us camera operators were using our personal cameras because the organization did not yet have their cameras. And this was making things very difficult for the editors because he was working with 3 different formats of videotape. And back then, when you loaded the video into the computer, it was done in real time. So if we had an event that was 3 cameras, it would take, and there was a 1-hour program, it would take the editor 3 hours just to get the information downloaded into the camera. Then he could go to work. I was glad I wasn't doing editing back then. I did learn, however, what the editors like to have while doing my own editing and reading about it. So I hope that the videos that I'm producing here are relatively easy to be edited, because I try to give enough time lead when I can so that they can see what's coming up and adjust their decisions. The second year, the Channel 22 got new cameras, semi-professional cameras that had all kinds of buttons and dials and things on it. And I learned how to use that. It was very fun. It was, I believe we had to set those cameras on our shoulders also because they were rather large. And we were still using videotape, not electronics like today. But let's see, we did quite a few different types of videoing there. And our Channel 22 crew was at least 20 members usually. There was the manager, Alan Reamer. We had camera operators. We probably had at one time up to 6 camera operators. We had editors, soundboard operators, because we had quite a few mics operating at various times. And then we had fellows and ladies that were doing interviews with certain people that they wanted to have televised. Later, just about the time I was leaving down there, they had put together an equipment rack that was on wheels that would allow them to monitor up to 3 cameras and live broadcast from whatever location we were at. And they were still messing around trying to get that straightened out and so forth. But the idea was to move this remote, or this, well, actually it was a shelving type thing designed for electronic installations. And I was glad I was leaving because I wasn't real sure how I was going to carry that to the next event. I think they got somebody due on maintenance for the Homeowners Association to do that. Programs that I videoed down there were the Homeowners Association board meetings. They were usually 3 cameras. We did a board members election program, which was kind of interesting because along the way, somebody that had been in TV as an occupation was very adamant that the lighting had to be exact. And we spent a half hour just checking the lighting on that particular program because he wanted the board members to show as important as they might become. Did seasonal choir concerts, which is very fun because I may not have paid the ticket to go see it, but I got to go see it free. And then if I missed something on it, I could always see it on television. One thing I've noticed is that when I'm recording meetings, I only absorb about 1/3 of what the meeting is progressing. And you can tell by watching my videos if I'm doing that or if I'm interested in the meeting and forgetting the video, because quite often the speaker walks off the side of the screen. Then I have to try to catch up to him. Down there in Arizona is where I learned what pickleball was all about, because I videoed a pickleball tournament one day. And an interesting one was a miniature golf tournament on a practice green. One of our golf courses had just a huge practice green. And somebody had set up an 18-hole miniature golf thing on the green with trees, sand traps, all kinds of things. And that was rather interesting. And I believe it was a women's project. It was fun watching those women trying to make a good score on a very short course. I did a tennis tournament down there one day when the temperature was only about 30 degrees outside. The ice was not melting that came off of some of the fences and things. That was kind of interesting. I was the only one with a nice leather jacket on, however. Nobody else was dressed that warm, I don't think. They had beautiful Veterans Day programs, all outside. And the Thunderbirds would make they were not the Thunderbirds. Luke Air Force Base is stationed at Phoenix, and it was always arranged that they had a formation fly over during this program. I did some B-roll for news programs. Well, now what's that? A B-roll is something related to the subject that's being talked about on television. If you're watching TV news, you see the announcer talking, and then all of a sudden you see a picture of a sign, a street, an emergency vehicle, all those things. That's the B-roll. The editors put that in there just to make it a little bit easier for the audience to know what's going on rather than just facing a face. I videoed a classic car show, which was rather interesting. Several cooking shows, both indoors and outdoors. And the one that I really thoroughly enjoyed was a chef who was cooking outdoors, and he had been a professional chef on fishing boats in Alaska. I found that rather interesting. They have adventures and learning programs down there too, and I did one or two of those. And then there were some golf games and golf lessons. Well, the golf games, we only shot a few tees. And then I did do some videoing of golf lessons. At one point, I guess I'd gotten so interested in everything that was going on that Alan Reamer called me one day and he said, "Would you head up a class on teaching our people how to run these cameras?" And I thought, hey, that was pretty good, because with my own cameras, I wanted to know what each button did so that I knew what to do at the right time. And I did that with the big cameras that we had gotten. And I still have the owner's manual that I printed. I copied it into the computer and then printed it. And I have a 3-ring binder. I put all sheets of paper in a plastic thing, so if necessary, I could take just that page out, not carry that 3-ring binder to the subject. And I did. I ended up, I found out that we had, 5 ways of zooming the lens on the camera when it was on a tripod. The tripod and our tripods here have the same feature. It's an accessory. There's 3 controls on there. There's a power on button. There's a start recording button or stop. And there's a rocker switch for zooming the lens into the subject and come back out again. And that, at some of the TRIAD meetings, has caused me problems because in my anxiety and anxiousness, I would push the power button instead of the record button, which meant that it would take a few seconds to get the power back on and then start recording. And for a year or so ago, I was starting to do that pretty regularly, and I talked to Mike about that. And he said, "I've done it too." I have also not started the camera. Running 2 cameras, I'd get one running and then come back to the other one and forget to push the start button on that one until 5 or 10 minutes into the program. I think that's one of the reasons we've got 2 cameras when on scene. How did I get to Channel 12? I called Mike one day when we quit living in Arizona for the winter, and I told him that I was available if he needed a camera operator, and I told him about my background in Arizona, and he said he might need help. And I waited and waited and waited and waited, and finally he did call me back. He took me with his student camera operator to a girls' basketball game in the gymnasium. And this was going to be, I think that was a live performance, wasn't it? It was directly going to the television set, which I had no experience of doing. And I did handle the camera for about the first quarter or so, and then the student took over from there. So at least I, at that point, had gotten to know the camera itself and how to operate it. Sometime later, Mike called me and said he needed help videoing a TRIAD meeting in the room the Shepherd Center was in. And he said they'd be using 2 cameras. And he was going to have one, I was going to have the other. Excuse me. The cameras here are much smaller than the ones we had in Arizona. They also are a totally different type of camera. Instead of having videotape, they record everything on a little chip. And I'm going to pass this around. Please leave it in the case because you can see through the case. Some of these are powerful enough to handle about 10 hours of video compared to all that tape that we were using with back in the years. To download a 1-hour program from 3 cameras probably takes about 1.5 minutes now, rather than 3 hours. I'll pass this around. The chips that we're using in our cameras, I believe, are mostly 3 to 4 hours. Is that right, Mike?
We have some bigger ones now too.
Yeah, well, I think I think Luke told me that 10 hours would be a maximum. Let's see. We also have on our cameras what's called a shotgun mic, and I can't see it in the light. Okay, it's not being used today, but it's a microphone that you've seen on cameras when I've been here that is recording the sound in a short circle right straight ahead of it. And it picks up very little audience sound. Well, it's good for getting the speaker talking, but if you want to know what the audience is behaving or how it's behaving, that won't work. That's where the second camera comes in, because that camera has built-in microphones and it's recording the sound of the whole room. We have several lavalier microphones, and those are the ones you see the speakers messing with up here, and the boxes down here. They are so that the speaker doesn't have to stand in one place speaking into a microphone and always attempting to adjust it. It also works really great if you got a speaker that's going to be walking around all over the place. We get them recorded real well. Yeah, this device that I've got on my jeans here is the transmitter that's going to a receiver that is mounted on the camera and plugged into the camera. The first TRIAD meeting that I was with Mike, that did end up going fine. Other meetings also went on fine with only a few problems. Like I told you, the problems with the putting the wrong button or pushing the wrong button. And then I was sometimes getting my sound controls mixed up and making it very difficult for the editors to come out with a decent sound. Items or things that we have videoed here, the county dive team. And in that particular case, we did not have enough lavalier mics. So I just took one mic and set it on a shelf near where they were going to be demonstrating their equipment. And we got usable sound from just doing that. Another interesting program was Lee Scholander, Kenyan police chief, told us about how he had taken a homeless person and rented him some room in his house at home until he got this fellow all set up. And he was there for several months, if I remember correctly. We had the county canine demonstration out in the gymnasium out here. That was interesting. We had a county drone program. We didn't get to see it flying, but we got to see the machine itself, and we were told how that would be used in the county. Recently, we did a video on the candidates for the county sheriff's office. Rosie has gotten a number of authors of books to speak to us, and those have been interesting too. Earlier this year, we had the person who was in charge of security at the Super Bowl, and that was too interesting also. She's also had Mike Rothman, the Minnesota Commerce Commission, John Priant, Treasure Island Police Chief, Kelly Lake, Carlton County Sheriff, and President of the Minnesota TRIAD, which gets me to the point where when we hosted the TRIAD, the state TRIAD meeting, it was at Treasure Island, and I was recording many of the things that were going on at that. I had another interesting microphone situation. I was going to be, forgot now who it was, videoing a particular speaker, of course, and fortunately I had two cameras set up, and we get going and got this big audience between me and the speaker, and I'm not getting sound over his lavalier mic. And I did not feel like I should rush forward through the crowd and see what was wrong. But I knew I had the second camera that was recording the sound as we were hearing it. So I just sweated it out whether or not it was going to work, and it did work, I believe. But what I had found out I did not know before was that these things have mute buttons on them. And the speaker's transmitter had been put onto mute, and that's why it wasn't working. So you learn along the way. One day we learned about roundabouts, didn't we, Rosie?
They're not my favorite, the ones here.
Some TRIAD meetings, the speakers do not want to be videoed for personal reasons, for audience reasons, but many of them are happy to be videoed, like Rosie mentioned earlier. How can you find these videos? Well, if you got local cable TV, you can just go to channel 12. If you have a computer, you can go to YouTube and go to your home page and then search from there for Cannon Falls Community Television. And when that comes up, scroll to Cannon Valley Senior, Cannon Falls Community TV on YouTube. Go to YouTube. I'm getting this mixed up. You'll get a list of things that can be done. There you go.
That's what that looks like. Wow. So that's the city's YouTube page.
Yeah, you just scan down a little bit and there's a whole row of TRIAD meetings after you get by the city council and the school board.
Down here is TRIAD at Shepherd Center. So,
And all the shows will come up. Well, let's see. All you have to do then is click on the show that you want to take a look at, the particular program. That's about all I have. You're probably happy to hear that, but if you have any questions, I'd be free to answer them.
what's your most favorite thing to video? Fence, outdoor stuff, something else?
I guess I really don't have a favorite.
Yeah.
The favorite is when everything works out right. Well, I do have to tell you one thing. At one of the TRIAD meetings, there was an awful lot of discussion about using 911. Even if it's just a non-emergency event. Well, one day at a TRIAD meeting, Tom did not have a pen, and he saw that I had one in my pocket, and he asked to borrow it. So I gave it to him, and then went back to my work. He went back to his work, and I got home, and I didn't have my pen. So I called 911, called the dispatcher, and I said, I want to have some fun with Tom. but he has stolen my pen. I did get it back in about 3 days. And I'm sorry he's not here, but that's probably why he's not here.
Yeah, back in your Air Force days, military does a lot of filming. You did not have an opportunity to do that?
Nope, I was navigating airplanes and telling the pilots where to go.
Okay.
I was on KC-135 aerial refuelers that were refueling bombers and fighters.
Question on digitizing the Super 8.
Go downtown and ask Mark what he might charge for that. He's got a basement full of electronics in that building downtown.
It's right next to
It's
the
right-
dentist across the little alley, right by the, yeah. and-
Yeah, the entrance is off of Highway 19 on that building.
So
That
you're recommending his service then, is that what I'm hearing?
he'd be a lot more knowledgeable about it than I
And
am.
I would recommend him.
I just want to thank you for sharing your background because you're an interesting guy and he's pretty humble. He doesn't talk about all the things that he has done for this community. So thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. It's one of the things that is fun at the school board meetings. While the school board meetings are entirely different than they were years ago, I had 6 years on the school board, so I'm somewhat familiar with what they talk about.